So my name is Alexander Bertel. I'm the editor-in-chief of Caribbean Journal, which is the largest website covering Caribbean travel and real estate. Mostly people living in the U.S., Canada, the U.K., people who travel to the Caribbean, and people who buy homes in the Caribbean, more importantly. It's funny, I was meeting with a tourism minister in the Bahamas a few weeks ago, and we were talking about his island, and he said, we have this slogan right now, it's "we're hot." And that's really true all over the region, whether you're looking right across the water in the Bahamas. I mean, if you go to downtown Nassau is booming with projects, Paradise Island as well. And it's pretty much universal. We heard about Puerto Rico. If you go to Cayman, there's a new condo or hotel being built almost everywhere you look. So it's a really exciting time in the Caribbean. And we're here to talk today about why it's hot and letting each of our panelists give a little bit of the overview of the market they work in. So Gavin, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, well, just to carry on what you said, and our Minister of Tourism, the Bahamas market is very hot right now. But you have to understand the Bahamas market. The Bahamas is an archipelago of 700 islands and keys, That's a lot of islands and keys. However, only about 15 or 16 of those are inhabited, so we have a market and many sub-markets in there. If you look at how the Bahamas is set up, you have Nassau, which is kind of what we call the New York City of the Bahamas. That's where you have all of the mega resorts, a lot of the infrastructure, all of the nightlife, restaurant, all the amenities at your fingertips, But we have something for everyone in the Bahamas, because you have Nassau, then you have what we call the Family Islands and the Outer Islands, which are a different product, a bit more reserved. You find that the real estate product there is a bit more boutique, larger lots, more single-family home style, but very interesting and something for everybody in the Bahamas.
Sean?
Yes, so the Turks and Caicos Islands is obviously significantly smaller than the Bahamas. We were previously part of the Commonwealth before it became independent. The market in the Turks and Caicos is primarily focused on the island of Providenciales, which up until the 1960s featured 3 small fishing villages of 100 people. So we're very much a blank canvas that's been put together by a very strong private sector, which has had a focus on high-end luxury tourism. We've had people who've come down to the islands and they say, well, you can fly over 700 islands in the Bahamas. Why would you come to the Turks and Caicos? And when you get there, you see that the dynamic between the private sector and the government has helped encourage a market that focuses on luxury in circumstances where we could never compete with Jamaica, the Dominican Republic, Cuba, because we don't have the economies of scale. And I think that we've seen over the years, obviously, the worldwide economy has continued to grow since 2009, 2010. And you can see in the Turks and Caicos, we're always talking about how we're very close to the next big thing is going to happen. And I've realized, having looked at it over the years, that really we're like the frog in the boiling water, right? You don't realize it's all boiling around you until you look around and go, we're in the boom, right? Just because we haven't had the same level of high density development, which we are getting now with the Ritz-Carlton and with the Andaz Resort coming on board as well. But as Stephen Wilson said earlier today, our market over the last 5 or 6 years has been driven by high-end luxury villa developments. And so that's what's kind of pushed us forward, and that's what's kind of kept us at the cutting edge of that luxury market within the region.
Great. You guys tell us about the DR.
So Dominican Republic, for you that are not aware, is very close to South Florida. It's less than 2-hour flight, and Dominican Republic has really been on the map. About 3 or 4 months ago, they put a big billboard up in downtown Miami, and it says, Dominican Republic has it all. And it's very interesting because my brother and I, we've spent a lot of time over the last 10 years there, and it's true, the Dominican Republic really does have it all. You have the most amazing beaches, you have the most amazing golf, mountains, shopping, culinary destinations. So for people that are really looking for an island experience and to be in the Caribbean but still feel like they have a lot of the sophistications of things that they're used to by being in the US, you have it there. Of course, on a slower pace. However, it's an amazing place, and every day more and more people are moving there, and it's currently one of the most visited countries in the world, and based on the economy, it's one of the fastest growing countries in the world as well.
So Brett took me there 10 years ago on vacation for my birthday, and we fell in love. The country's been super amazing. The evolution of the country, it's been so good to us. Seeing restaurateurs from Europe and New York just jump down there and open up shop in Santo Domingo and now in Punta Cana, we get a chance to kind of go all around the country. We're from the capital to Punta Cana. We personally have a place in Casa de Campo in between. We work very closely with Anders, who was just up here before, doing all the luxury villa rentals. We're seeing people, a lot of New Yorkers, a lot of people from Toronto just coming in for the first time, falling in love with the country and not wanting to leave. So it's been incredible to us so far, and just beginning.
What are some of the commonalities we're all seeing in the Caribbean real estate market? I'll put this to everyone. What are the biggest trends you're seeing? What's fueling all of this growth?
So growing up in South Florida, I think the first time I got a taste of the Caribbean was going on cruises. And, cruises are for some people, they're not for other people. But what's great is that you get to try different islands and kind of see if it's a place you'd want to then go home, book a ticket, fly, and maybe, visit for a week. So growing up, I've been to the Cayman Islands. I went to the Bahamas several times. The first time I ever went to Dominican Republic was on a cruise. And, I think what's so interesting is that every island is so different, yet South Florida being so close to all of them and being like a hub, it's so easy to access for Americans. So I think people really need to understand really how close it is and how easy it is to get to the Caribbean. And I do feel like people will resonate with different islands. Those who enjoy the Hispanic culture, of course, would love Dominican Republic, whereas maybe people who prefer the British culture, a different culture, would fall in love with a different island. But one thing they all have in common is the fact that they're in the Caribbean. You have amazing weather the whole year. And again, you're so close to the U.S. So,
two of the commonalities I'm seeing across the board is the increase in vacation rentals. We're seeing in the Bahamas that it's been at such a high demand with the Airbnb, the HomeAways, that our government now has to focus on putting in legislation to regulate, because they realize that we have our large resorts have now started to lean on government, saying that, hey, we're pumping millions of dollars into the economy and we get room tax, government taxes, and now they're starting to compete with the Airbnbs of the Caribbean now. And so now governments have started to look at alternative ways to regulate this vacation industry, The other commonality I'm seeing is that it's becoming a lifestyle. It's a lifestyle purchase. It's a change of lifestyle. So the buyer, the investor, who are coming to the Bahamas are looking for the lifestyle of the island. A lot of people complain about how laid back the islands are. And yes, when you come to the Bahamas, you're definitely on island time. So at first it's hard to adjust, but after being there for a while, persons start to love it, and it becomes their new lifestyle.
Yeah, I think that Gavin hit on it there. It's, experience is the new luxury, right? It's not just about having an amazing property that people just go and sit on the beach. They want to be able to go and do things and kind of build around that. And I think the commonality from all the jurisdictions that are represented here is the airlift. We're all very accessible up and down the East Coast, Chicago, Toronto, Montreal, to a lesser extent for us, Europe. And I think the fact that, I have clients who say that, they live in New York. They can be in the Turks and Caicos faster than they can be in downtown Manhattan. And they don't, they know which one they choose any day of the week. And so I think that's what's helped driving it. I think we see more and more carriers directing themselves towards the Caribbean. Turks and Caicos have just, Southwest was the last one a couple of years ago. And everyone who continues to expand. And I think, as Adam Greenfader was saying here earlier today, there's more and more tourism being driven towards the Caribbean, and when people come to these destinations, they fall in love with where they are and whatever those individual characteristics are, and so that's helping to drive the product, because a lot of what the people are selling, talking to the people in the different countries, is from foreign direct investment.
I think one of the biggest mysteries, at least for our readers and for a lot of people, and I imagine for people who are looking to help facilitate these deals, is how do you actually buy real estate down there and the vagaries of buying on different islands. So I'd like to kind of get into that process. First, just what kind of restrictions or what kind of laws are there governing each of your destinations for people who want to buy property there?
Sorry.
Well, I'll start with DR. We're very fortunate that a lot of the deals that we close actually transact, and the money stays in the States. A lot of the deals are, under corporations. We just did a deal in Cap Cana. Both sides, closed with Chase Bank. Money never, came into DR. Seller was from the Hamptons. Buyers from San Francisco, originally Bulgarian, and actually a deal we did with Anders as well. So it's a very small world. So, for us, we're very fortunate because a lot of the deals just don't even, come into the DR.
What about property taxes? I imagine that's something people think about as well. I know.
So as far as Dominican Republic, I mean, your property taxes are about 1% of the price, so it's pretty straightforward.
A lot of the deals, though, we're selling are in communities where there's a government incentive to the developer that they can then pass on to the purchaser, and it's called the Confutor. And again, back to Anders, he mentioned it's very attractive because you come in there, you think no property taxes, and it helps the momentum of the area, and that just continues to evolve and grow and grow and grow. It's very exciting.
So, and something else to note when purchasing in the Caribbean, and I know it is in the Bahamas and Turks, I'm not sure about DR, but when buying, there's something that we call a government stamp tax as well. So on top of your purchase price, you have a government stamp tax. In the Bahamas, that government stamp tax is 10%, and it is generally split 50-50 between the buyer and the seller. I think it's different in Turks.
So in the Turks, we don't have any annual property tax, which obviously makes it another incentive for buyers. On the island of Providenciales, the stamp duty rate ranges between 6.5% and 10% when you purchase, depending on the value. So anything over $500,000 is 10%. Legally, under the stamp duty ordinance, the responsibility lies with both parties, but typically the attorneys will contract that it's the purchaser's responsibility to pay the stamp duty upon closing.
What about the financing climate or financing options for buyers?
So, I mean, financing, again, it's another thing that's very straightforward. Dominican Republic, very similar to South Florida, it's a very relationship-oriented destination. If you are fortunate enough to have a good relationship with a local person, like we did when we met Anders in Dominican Republic, walking into a bank, you're able to open up a bank account simply with your passport and a little bit of identification. And it's the same thing. I mean, it's quite easy actually to obtain a loan. You're not going to have the same type of interest rate you would here in the US, but again, if you want to obtain financing, it's quite straightforward.
Sorry.
In the Bahamas, we have a lot of the large Canadian banks, so RBC, Scotiabank, First Caribbean, and what we find in our market is that majority of the financing is geared towards the local market. Most of our non-locals are generally cash buyers. However, there's been a slight shift over the last 5 years because we are also we have a very strong financial industry in the Bahamas. So we have a lot of offshore banks, Swiss banks, French banks, Brazilian banks, and and wealth managers, and they've now started offering a lot of incentives and products to high net worth individuals where they can access financing as well. And so we have funding straight across the board, whether you're a local looking to purchase $300,000 or you're a high net worth individual wanting to spend 10, 15, 20 million.
I'm sorry, I had to laugh at the idea of being straightforward because I think that there's island time, and I says bank island time. So like the Bahamas and a lot of the older British jurisdictions, our primary lenders are Scotiabank, RBC, CIBC, First Caribbean, so the big Canadian banks. I would agree with Gavin. Most of our purchasers who are coming in from abroad are either purchasing themselves, or there are a number of private lenders who will tell you that if the primary banks could make decisions quicker, they would be out of business. But one of the commonalities you see is that when you get to the higher level in the Caribbean, a lot of the banks are centralized. So decision-making processes for Scotiabank can go back to Jamaica or the Cayman Islands, and RBC goes to Nassau. So you end up, particularly at the higher level, dealing with the same people in the different branches, different banks, regardless of which of the jurisdictions you end up in.
Interesting. And what about commission structure, referrals? How does that work for brokers in the U.S. who bring you a deal or bring a deal to the Caribbean? How does that tend to work?
Show me the money. That's what it's all about in our business. It's about commissions. Standard in the Bahamas, we pay a 6% commission for improved properties and 10% on vacant land. Being in the Caribbean and being in the Bahamas, we still have a large inventory of vacant land, so it's very normal for us or our agents to sell vacant parcels. Also, it is not uncommon in the Bahamas for an agent to represent both sides. I know you don't see that very, very often here in the U.S., but in specific in the Bahamas, it is not uncommon where you would have one agent representing both sides. And I can steal something from what the law firms said. They generally put up what they call a Chinese wall in between in the firm, for whatever that's worth. On the referral basis, we generally pay a 25% referral fee to referring agents. We at CA Christie, we tend to form a lot of strategic partners in our feeder markets, South Florida, New York, the Midwest, Texas, and Europe. So we form a lot of relationships there. We get a lot of business out of Miami. What we don't have, and I'm sure I can find today, is we don't have a strategic partner in Boca.
There you go.
Not yet. Right?
The commission structures are the same in the Turks and Caicos and the same approach. And I think that, having talked with different people who are here today, and the question is, well, I have someone the specific question today, I have someone who owns a condo in Florida, they're not making any money off of it, they want to get out. And they see the numbers that are being thrown around, the profit that's being made, they're setting aside capital appreciation on properties abroad, and they say, well, your people are going to go and buy somewhere. You're better off, engaging these relationships so that when someone says, well, I want to buy somewhere in the Caribbean, well, I've got someone in the Bahamas I can talk to, I can speak to someone in Turks and Caicos, and then you're getting a bit of that pie, right? Because otherwise they're going to fly off, they'll meet somebody, and the money's there to be made. One of the big things that the agency always tries to do is to develop these relationships abroad so that you're bringing people to the product rather than waiting for them to come to you.
How are you finding buyers in general, and who are these buyers? I mean, if you can generalize, who do they tend to be? Are they people coming on vacation and looking while they're there? Are they people coming from brokers? Or what's the main trend in that regard?
So I've been in the business for 13 years, building a database through selling, marketing, consulting, 16 developments. So my brother and I and our firm have over 1 million people in our database. On a daily, weekly basis, we reach out and connect with agents from Asia, Europe, North, South America, all over. And what we do now is we fly in agents to show them how to sell our product. So they expect the same commission split. We're more than happy to do anything we can to get you guys down to understand how to sell what we sell, what we're building, what we're involved with. Our background in development sales has been very, very important going into the Dominican market and making these deals happen.
Yeah, it's all about relationship building. The more people you get in front of, historically, buyers in Turks and Caicos come down on holiday, they see something they like. I hear on countless occasions from clients that I've been all around the Caribbean and I came here and I said I'd never go to one place more than once, and then I come to Turks and Caicos and I love it, and now I'm buying somewhere. And so typically that's the way it has been in our market.
Yeah, well, the Bahamas gets approximately just shy of about 7 million visitors a year, which is a lot of visitors, and so we have a lot of foot traffic that comes to the island. Outside of that, we're through our normal marketing methods, social media, but what has proven best for us, as I said, is our strategic partnerships. That has been the best. It's a referral base. We have strategic partners in our main feeder markets globally, and that has been probably the biggest success for us.
We talked a little bit about this, but is there a breakdown in terms of popularity for villas or single-family homes versus condos? We see increasingly in the Caribbean, we see these residential resorts where people can put stuff in the rental pool and they're not using it. What are you seeing in your destinations?
I think a lot of it just has to do with people's needs, budget, location, and all of those things. When it comes to a trend, condo versus villa, it really depends on what the purpose of the purchase is for. We've sold in a lot of the newer developments in Dominican Republic. People will come and they'll buy several condos because they know that it's a good investment. They can have them put on Airbnb. VRBO, any of the sites, HomeAway, stuff like that, and make it a moneymaker, just like they can do it with a villa as well. But it all has to do with the type of money they're looking to spend. For example, inside Casa de Campo, you can buy a one-bedroom apartment for $300,000, but you can buy villas up to $30 million. So again, it depends. You can also buy a nice house for $1 million. There's really something for everyone. So as far as the trend, it really just has to do with the needs of the buyer. But there's attractive properties for really all price ranges.
Yeah. So in Nassau, as I explained earlier, Nassau is what you consider like the New York City of the Bahamas. Kind of the trend and stuff that we're seeing there is, in the next 24 months, we'll have more luxury condominiums on the building than we've ever had in the history of the Bahamas, which is a very good sign. And the new product in the Bahamas is now these full-service, full amenitized condominium buildings. So similar to what I call a Miami style, where you can live in a luxury unit and go downstairs. You have coffee, gym, movie theater, restaurant, everything all in one. But when you move outside of Nassau, it's a totally different product. So when you get into the Family Islands, as I said, you're looking at a more boutique, smaller boutique hotels, less keys, more of the villa type style, beachfront villas. So it really depends on where you want to be and what you want to do.
Yeah, I mean, we see a lot of variety because we have so much of the country that's undeveloped. And so you're seeing, for the last few years, the luxury villa market. You're seeing a bit of a transition now as existing resorts kind of phase out the VRBO model. So you have the people who have been doing that are moving on, but the people who are buy into a system that they understand the rules when they purchase it. But it's still, and the last thing is land banking, because obviously with no property tax, you can go and make a purchase and you can sit on it for 10 years and it's not costing you anything other than the stamp duty at the front end.
Now, I'm going to go around and ask everyone for their sort of regional outlook. But before I do, I want everyone in the audience to start thinking if you have questions you want to ask, because we're going to open it up to the audience in a minute. But I wanted to start, where do you see the market going regionally right now in the next few years? What's important for people to know, and what's important for buyers to know?
I think when it comes to Dominican Republic, you're only going to see a larger and larger influx of people coming. I think a lot of them start by coming for vacation. They fall in love with it, which is what happened with us, and then they end up purchasing a place, whether they want to live there part-time, full-time, have it as an investment property. And I think that the driving force bringing people there is the constant, emerging of infrastructure. The first time I went to Punta Cana 10 years ago, there wasn't a whole lot there. Now you go to Punta Cana, you have some of the best hospitals in the island. You have multiple supermarkets, you have shopping destinations, you have amazing restaurants. You don't have to just stay in your all-inclusive resort. And for the people that want to, at the resorts that try to scare the clientele by saying, don't leave, you can't leave. We've been there for so long, and there's never been a moment where we truly felt unsafe. Right. I've actually felt a lot more unsafe walking around New York City than I did walking around Dominican Republic.
There's only one way for the Bahamas, and that's forward and up. We have a brand new $450 million airport. The government a few weeks ago just recently signed a new $250 million redesign of the entire port of downtown. Which means that we've covered our two main ports of entry with top-of-the-line, brand new, amenitized ports. The private island market is very hot. We have more new construction, more new development than we've ever seen coming into the market over the next 24 months. And so we only have one way, and that's forward, upward, and onward together.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Turks and Caicos is in and of itself a brand. Right, and we're associated with luxury. I was born in the Turks and Caicos. I went to boarding school in Ireland, and when I left, no one knew where the Turks and Caicos was. There were a handful of divers, and that was it. I think we're going to continue to see growth. I think that there's going to be the constant back and forth about the cost of the luxury development, the cost of living on the island, which isn't cheap. But I think that there's parts of Providenciales outside of Grace Bay, which is the main tourist area. that are still ripe for development, and then kind of movement towards our outer islands like North Caicos and Middle Caicos, where there's still significant value in real estate investment and large areas of land for development.
Great. So does anyone in the audience have any questions for our panelists?
There you go. There you go. There you go.
Gavin, it's not fair if you load your friends in for the questions.
All right, so you asked a question in reference to the commission earlier, and I said, you know what, this is a perfect opportunity. I'm here representing a developer, One Ocean on Paradise Island, which is previously Replay. And what we do at One Ocean, which is good, is if you as an agent, any of you here brought us a sale, whether it's just a referral or you came with the client yourself, we would pay you 5% on the sale of the unit. It's not a 25% split of the commission. It's literally 5% on the sale. You bring us someone they bought for $1 million, 50,000 goes to you. If you bring them 5 million, the money goes right back to you. So there's no split, there's no nothing. And again, at One Ocean, if your client decides, you know what, I want to rent. For the person that's looking for that client that's not making any money in Miami, if that client came in and let's say they rented their place, if it's whatever it is, they keep 100% of whatever of the rental income. So there's no 60-40 split, there's no 50-50. So you come and go as you please, you own it entirely. And so if you're looking for investment in the Bahamas and you got a client that's interested, you can find me anywhere. All right.
Great question.
Next
Yeah.
question.
Mac, I think if you keep that up, Gavin's going to ask Ian not to invite you back next year.
Good morning again, everyone.
Good morning.
Siobhan Johnson from the Bahamas.
Welcome.
I just have a question in terms of the theme is selling the Caribbean. I'm curious to know what are the challenges that you actually face and the things that you feel you have to overcome in selling the Caribbean.
I think in all the Caribbean jurisdictions, we all have the challenge in dealing with different governments, and particularly in small places like ours. Like the population's only 40,000. I think the voting population's only about 10, right? So relationship building is incredibly important. You need to know, who the departments you need to go through. You need to know the people who are going to get things done. And like as an example, I lobbied the government for the last couple of years that they should be waiving stamp duty on purchases for Turks and Caicos Islanders. And in April, they brought that in. So now, Turks Islanders will be able to get a piece of the pie that they weren't able to get to before because they were having difficulty attaining that stamp duty purchase as well as their deposit and everything else. But I think that you need to be able to connect with people on the ground who have those relationships and who you can trust. Right? There's no shortage of people who will tell you they'll get a job done, right? But there's only a handful who actually have the wherewithal to do it, and who are going to be driven in the kind of the background that particularly investors from the United States and America are going to expect.
We're very fortunate if we have the client come in. I mean, they really don't have many issues. We have it all set up for them. They come in, our team, we have the lawyer, we have the CPA, we have the banking, and they feel very comfortable because there's very few places where you have a team or a company like Brett and I's where we live and work and play in both DR and in South Florida. We built our business here, we built our business there, and now we go back and forth. So as a buyer from New York or a buyer from LA comes to us, they can really feel confident in their decision to make a purchase. And there really is no hesitation. Like I said, a lot of the times the deals stay under corporation in the States. And so we're very fortunate to make a lot of transactions, just very smooth.
I would just say obstacle-wise for us, it was more of like a learning curve, and it's just that you have to be very, very
Patient.
Very patient. We're used to the Miami, New York pace, and taking that energy to Dominican Republic, you could literally want to kill yourself because, it's very, very slow.
I think William has a
But
question.
you have to actually just go with it and go with the flow and realize that, everyone's term in Dominican Republic is mañana, which means tomorrow, because, when you call a lawyer or, the accountant or anything, they tell you they'll get back to you with that mañana, which might mean 2 weeks later. You just have to be patient and go with the flow and go have Brugal on the beach and relax,
go.
because if you try to drive yourself crazy, you will want to pick up and leave.
Anders?
One of the big challenges I find, specifically in the Bahamas, especially when you have large investors coming to the island, one of the issues we have is data and access to data. You know, it's amazing how in the U.S. if I wanted to do a project next door, I can go online, press 1, 2, 3 buttons, and I have all the information I need. It doesn't work like that in the Bahamas. You know, unfortunately, because of our governments and our registrar general, where we register all of our properties, it's still done by we're still a very heavy paper society, and so a lot of this stuff is still done on paper, and you have to send someone physically, you know, to the registrar general and or go through a lawyer to get specific data, and then you have to worry, is the data right, is it accurate, and so it's a big process just to find current relevant data.
Anyone have any other questions?
Anders, go ahead.
I just had one comment that I've kind of faced down in the Dominican, just getting back to your question, which you guys addressed perfectly, because working with you guys, it makes it simple. But one concern that some buyers have about the Dominican is that everything has to be done in Spanish. So obviously, Dominican Republic is a Spanish-speaking country. We're under the Spanish Civil Code or the same system, meaning that every contract they sign has to be done in Spanish. We always provide them with English translations, but that's kind of one of the little drawbacks in the Dominican, that it has to be done in Spanish, and when people don't speak it, they go, how do we know what this actually says? Right. But exactly like Brett and David said, with having the right team behind you, you'll get a translated copy, get everything taken care of for you, but that might be the only thing that we really face as an obstacle down there.
Exactly. For example, you know, you just want to make sure, like for us, the law firms we work with, the accountants we work with, they're all not even bilingual, they're multilingual. The law firm that we always work with Anders, I mean, they speak English, Spanish, French, German, Italian, any language you can think of. So for buyers that are coming from any other country, they do feel that sense of comfort.
I have a question for everybody here. This is obviously selling the Caribbean. What is everybody's interest in the Caribbean? Do you guys are working with a buyer? Do you guys come often? Do you want to try to promote the Caribbean? Is there an island, you know, up here that you are passionate about and thinking you might have a buyer to, you know, sell, or is there a family member? Because I mean, you have everybody here to help you make that transaction. Maybe there's a deal in the audience. Do you want?
I have a question, especially the Dominican Republic. You mentioned a transaction could be done from start till finish outside of the jurisdiction.
Yes.
How does that serve the government and income for your country? And is there a stamp duty? You didn't mention anything about having to pay a stamp duty. So how is that done, and how does that benefit the country itself?
I think it might have been communicated not properly. It's not that the transaction doesn't take place in Dominican Republic. All the paperwork everything is done through the government. The government is aware of the purchase and all of that. What we're saying is that in some instances, if our home is, you know, owned under a corporation or an LLC, you can just sell the shares of the company, which include the home as the main asset and things like that. Which again, an accountant and a lawyer are the ones that are doing all of that paperwork and everything. But it's not like, you know, these deals are being done under the table. What my brother, or at least what I think was portrayed, is that the money is just transferred through the U.S. because, again, most properties in Dominican Republic now are being traded in dollars. So the properties, though, are still being conveyed through the Dominican government.
Of course.
And further to that, is there a screening process for any, is there a financial crimes unit or anything that overlooks or oversees any purchases that comes through the jurisdiction to protect any financial crimes coming into your jurisdiction?
Very strict.
Well, yeah, I mean, you know,
After the Panama
everyone
Papers.
is familiar with the Panama Papers and, you know, having documents that are not correct and all of that. You now have to prove where the money is coming from. So in order to purchase properties in Dominican Republic, they have to know where that money originated from.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Andrew Okola. Before I ask the question that I'm intending to ask, I'm just going to answer Brett's question that he threw out to us. Now, for my sins, my interest here is I'm a barrister at law, called to the Bar of England and Wales, practice there. but I have a boutique law practice in the Eastern Caribbean islands of Antigua and Barbuda. So my interest here is really to see how I can then serve the interests of possibly purchasers, developers, or real estate agents who have clients who need the kind of legal service providers who actually know how to operate in really first world as opposed to Caribbean time, just to have a dig at Gavin. So yes, that's my interest. Secondly, my questions to the panel, I think this goes most for Brett and David and Sean. I do know it says sell in the Caribbean, and I hear about Dominican Republic, and I hear about Turks and Caicos. But I would like to know, what other interests, what other information can you tell us based on your interest in other islands in the Caribbean in general, but certainly for me, in Antigua and Barbuda and the Eastern Caribbean in particular. And is there anyone here who are interested in us having a discussion in respect of either Antigua and Barbuda in particular or the Eastern Caribbean in general?
I think that, I mean, obviously what Ian Hurdle and I do entails a lot around working both with large-scale developers who are seeking development properties around the Caribbean, as well as enhancing the agency brand in these different jurisdictions. And so Antigua and Barbuda is one that we've been to a number of times to meet with prospective companies there. And I think I will come back to Gavin's point on data, right? The Turks and Caicos is a jurisdiction where we have a very organized real estate association. Our president, Beth Atkins, was just asking some questions there. And it is much more of that kind of formulated, regulated market. When you get further down, particularly the Lesser Antilles and the Eastern Caribbean, you don't have access to all of that information. Exclusivity of listing agreements doesn't exist in the same way as it would in the United States or in the Turks and Caicos. And so it becomes harder to focus on exactly what's going on. Antigua is an example where every time I'm there, it's booming and everyone says how much is going on, but it's really hard to ascertain exactly what it is. You know, their land system is exactly the same as ours, so I have no difficulty understanding that. But putting together the information as to what actually is being sold becomes more of a challenge.
Good afternoon. I'm Phyllis Strain. I'm a realtor with Berkshire Hathaway in Delray Beach. And the reason I'm here is I would like to have a better understanding of the Grand Bahamas. I have not been there. I've been to the Turks and Caicos. But I hear a lot about Nassau. But how would you describe the Grand Bahama, and what drives people there? Is it more laid back than Nassau, or are cruise ships going into this area, or?
Yes, and Grand Bahama is a whole another seminar, but I can kind of give you something very brief. Nassau is kind of the New York City. Grand Bahama has always been considered, they call the second city of Freeport, you know. It's probably the best planned city in Nassau, has some of the best infrastructure, it has the container port, and it was always dubbed as Grand Bahama used to be the kind of the industrial hub for the Bahamas, you know. But Grand Bahama has had a very tough time. They had some very bad hurricanes many years ago, and the island never really caught itself until very lately. Now, if you look in the news, there's lots of chatter and very positive chatter about Grand Bahama. The hotel was just recently purchased, and the cruise lines have a part of that or involved in that. There's a new port coming. And so, to me, Grand Bahama is like a sleeping giant, you know? And I think it probably had some of the best and most attractive prices per square foot in the Bahamas. Now is a very good time to look at Grand Bahama because with the biggest hotel now being sold, with the new group coming in and the cruise lines coming in, there's a lot of room for growth in Grand Bahama. So if you have clients, properties, persons interested in Grand Bahama, that's something we can definitely discuss.
I just wondered how Christie's do they have an office in Grand Bahama?
Yes, we have strategic partners and affiliates in Grand Bahama as well. So yes, yeah, we're based in Nassau, but we do have strategic partners there.
Okay, thank you.
I think that there's something that came up in that conversation that I think that we probably need to discuss as well. And the fact is that we live in a very volatile region in respect of the prospect of hurricanes on any given year. And in 2017, the Turks and Caicos was in the path of Hurricane Irma when it came through. And we're lucky enough that the new developments are built to Miami-Dade code. And so the moments of fear in the month or two that pass afterwards have opened back up our market, because we're still there, because the building standards are so high. And I think that from an education perspective, that's a really important thing for people who are coming in to understand that the standards that we set for development are such that even with the strongest recorded storm coming through us, we're still back up, the market is there, and we're still back in this boom.
Great. Well, I want to thank all of our panelists, Brett, David, Sean, Gavin, for a really interesting conversation. And thank you for being a great audience. Thank you.